What is up, my friends, and welcome to another edition of the XFL Week in Review. I'm your host, Mark Perry, editor of XFL News Hub. On this week's show, we got Dean Blandino, our own Jay Noakes, sits down with Dean Blandino, head of referees for the XFL, or former, or maybe he'll be back, who the heck knows. They talk all sorts of stuff about the XFL rules. You're not going to miss that interview. That's a great interview. Again, from our guy, Jay Noakes. Plus, we got some latest news going on with some Zoom calls. We get into that, and maybe what's coming in the future for the XFL. Also, I just wanted to throw out this week before we get into everything that Josh Hawkins was cut by the Atlanta Falcons. He was with the Dallas Renegades, cornerback. And Jeff Badette with the Renegades signed with the Washington Sports Football Team, or whatever the heck they're called now. So I just wanted to throw those two news bits out there after we get into our interview, and then we get into the news. We'll do the news first, and then we'll get into our interview. Good stuff there, and plus your social media stuff. And speaking of social media, how do you get in touch with the show? You email podcast at XFL News Hub with your MP3s or videos, or call 888-430-7692 extension 3. And we always like it if you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We read it on the show. We really appreciate that. So without further ado, folks, we'll get into the news, then we'll get into the interview with Dean Blandino, then we'll get into your social media stuff, and then we'll wrap it up for this week's show. So without further ado, folks, let's just get into the week that was the XFL. Former Director of Football Operations, Innovation, and Strategy for the XFL, Sam Schwartz tweeted about how much time it would take to get players ready for a 2021 XFL season. Quote, at the XFL, this was in response to Pete Thamel's, here's a looming complicating factor in the Pac-12 return. Some of the schools haven't been lifting or working out in months. One source estimated 8 weeks needed for a safe ramp up. Quote, if it's not going to be COVID, our players are going to get injured another way. So Schwartzstein then responded, said, quote, at the XFL, we talked to medical professionals, trainers, strength coaches, and players, and deduced 6 weeks is the minimum amount of time to go couch to kickoff. 2 weeks conditioning plus walkthroughs, 1 week acclimating to hitting, 2.5 weeks training camp, 1 game week. Considering we know most of the XFL players have either been in the offseason with the NFL camps or staying in shape, some conditioning time may not be as long as expected for college practices. The Pac-10, especially with the California teams, are not allowed to have full practices because of COVID guidelines. Considering we're already ready at the start of the season, this wouldn't apply to the XFL. So many fans are anticipating news and movement towards a 2021 season for the XFL, but one of the problems is we weren't sure how much time they would actually need to ramp up and start playing again. Well, according to Schwartzstein, he says it would take 6 weeks for those players to get ready. The XFL 2020 season kicked off 1 week after the NFL Super Bowl, which was held February 2nd. If the plan is to mirror that calendar, this year's Super Bowl is on February 7th, which means the 2021 season of the XFL wouldn't begin until at least November 13th at the least. Last year's XFL draft was held on October 15th, which is a month away from this time. That may be moved back, but if 6 weeks is what you need to get the players ready once they allocate it to the teams, we still have plenty of time to get a 2021 season plan to happen. There are things that do need to happen quickly, though. Coaches need to be called and found. Last year's players need to be contacted to see whether they want to play. Venue leases need to be finalized, etc. At this point, there are 4 that we know of that are very willing to house teams. Dallas, which people were saying, no, Dallas is in. LA, Houston, Tampa. Tampa recently filed an objection about their lease, and that just had to do with money, but they were definitely interested in wanting to do it again. If the league decides to play in one area of a bubble like the NHL or NBA, then those leases might not even be a big deal. Last year's training camp was similar to a bubble, and XFL President Jeffrey Pollack, half-brother, is Gary Bettman, commissioner of the NHL, so the league is not unfamiliar with the concept. Clearly, these two guys could talk to each other. So it's in the middle of September. Team staff need to be hired, executive vendors. Many from last year would certainly return. Who knows if they even have a job again. Media personnel, would need to be hired. The big question is the broadcasting rights and other operational issues. But we have until January, really, to get all this off, including a draft. So if you think about it, you wouldn't even need to have a draft until November if you really wanted to. 3.5 months should suffice. So we know the clock is running. We don't know what's going on, but we do know that there's stuff going on behind the scenes. So in our worry that, hey, we can't have an XFL season because, it's already mid-September, based on what Sam Schwartz said, we still have time to put this thing together. It was a little tough start for the new owners of the XFL. First, we heard about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as his family contracting COVID. And now we hear that Dani Garcia, who recently released a video, talks about how she tore her calf muscle while celebrating the purchase of the league.
Hey guys, I am at Rienzi Strength Orlando, and I wanted to take a moment and tell you a story about something that happened to me the night I found out I got the XFL. So one moment I'm running towards Dave and I'm jumping up and down yelling, I got it. And the next moment I'm on the floor with a torn calf muscle. In fact, I have been recovering these past 8 weeks and also reassessing because, truthfully, setbacks are moments for reassessment. And I recognize that, number one, I'm going to be busier than ever. And secondly, I want muscles that can show and go. So I'm going to need new training techniques. I want to re-examine my diet. I want to re-examine stress levels. And I'm hoping to share all this with you so that it can be a benefit to you and you can hopefully incorporate some of this. My commitment is to be the most curvascular chairperson that I know, and also to be able to share with you the insights that I learned. So it's going to be great, and I can't wait.
In the video, she talks about how excited she was winning the bid. While jumping around, she tore her calf muscle. After recovering for the past 8 weeks, she has re-examined everything in her life, as she said. She wants to move forward with the XFL in the most productive way. So even though The Rock had the virus, Dani tore a muscle, both of them are taking these opportunities to become the best leaders they can for the XFL. Quote, setbacks are moments for reassessment. That, my friends, is a growth mindseted person. And there is a fantastic book out there by Carol Dweck all about mindset, and it's my favorite book of all time. And if you have a positive mindset like The Rock and Dani Garcia and others included in the XFL, that's how you are successful. It's all about mindset, my friends. And clearly Dani and The Rock have the right mindset. You could clearly see by their success and what they say. Setbacks are moments for reassessment. Instead of bad things happening to them and they crumble and say that the XFL is somehow cursed or something like that. No, they said, hey, these are just setbacks. And always, my friends, in all of our lives, when we have these setbacks, it's usually because something big is on the horizon. You just have to stick with it. The new XFL owners are sticking to a methodical approach, and we have some details, thanks to our man Mike Mitchell, on this Zoom call picture. So we're a month away since the sale was finalized with new owners Dani Garcia, The Rock, Jerry Cardinal, and Redbird Capital Partners. The new owners have taken full control of the league actually just this past week, and the XFL fan base is dying for some news. And according to our man Jay Noakes, he was told, somebody close to the situation, that the league would, quote, would take methodical approach when planning for a relaunch. They're not just going to jump into this, and this is according to our own Jay Noakes. This possibly meant that the official announcement wouldn't be made immediately, but in due time we have to be patient. This hasn't stopped the new owners from sharing their excitement via their respective social media accounts. On Friday, Dani Garcia shared a photo via her Instagram, which was a picture of a Zoom call with the caption XFL Zoom Call meeting number 42 of the week. That's right, 42 of the week. So they are all in this XFL. And in the picture, there's some notable faces, thanks to Mike Mitchell. In the picture, in the Zoom call, there's Garcia and The Rock, and she's pointing out that The Rock is in there in between filming, I think it's his Netflix film. In there was Jeffrey Pollock, Sidney Wagner, Basil DeVito, Thomas Van Wasler, Sharag Mithian, and Toby Lee of Redbird Capital. They were all in the meeting. A lot of these people were former XFL employees that were kind of stuck around, I think, because of, that skeleton crew of XFL people that were held on to wind things down. It looks like they were part of this meeting, which makes it real interesting. So they have to do all sorts of things to get the league going. Getting the lease agreements, for the television contracts, the health insurance, all of this stuff out. Now, we should point out that these are original XFL's employees, but they only might be there on a temporary basis with the new ownership. We're not sure. It's unclear on the status of, for example, XFL president Jeffrey Pollack and other employees who remain from Alpha after the league shut down. So these guys might just be there just to help them get going, and then they might just move on their way. Like, we just don't know. We hope that they all stay. This is not breaking news or anything like that, but it does give you an idea that things are happening behind the scenes, and they're working on this thing every day to get something going. So the idea that if this was 42 meetings of the week, you do the math, they're clearly, and then it's not just having a meeting and no one's doing anything. They're really working hard to try to, I believe, get this XFL season going in 2021. And we're hearing that there should be some interesting news coming soon, so you're going to have to stay tuned. So it looks like the Tampa Bay Vipers might not be moving to Orlando after all. And this is from digging from our own Josh Davis. What he found in some of the legal documents is that the XFL is trying to restart their agreement with Raymond James Stadium. Now, during this whole process, between the bankruptcy and everything else, after the league was sold to Alpha Equico, Dani Garcia, The Rock, and Redbird Capital, they've essentially tried to start restarting some of the agreements. And one of the agreements that they had agreed to restart was the agreement between the Tampa Bay Vipers home stadium of Raymond James Stadium, the Tampa Bay Sports Authority in particular. As part of the documentation, it was submitted that there was some kind of agreement in place. Now, this doesn't mean 100% that the Tampa Bay Vipers they will still play in Tampa. We don't know any of this stuff, but it's a good sign. Why would you try to restart an agreement with a city and a venue that you have no interest in using in the future? That's kind of the thing. This happened a couple weeks ago, and in this whole agreement, they have what is called a cure amount, and the cure amount is kind of like, hey, if you pay us this, then we'll restart and we'll get going, and we're good to go. Sometimes it's $0 that they're just going to restart the agreement. Sometimes it could be $100,000. We saw this before earlier with Houston, where there was this cure amount, and then it was brought up again, and it was short $100,000. But eventually, that all went through. And usually, that's just part of negotiations. The biggest idea of this whole thing is them saying, yes, we would like to restart our agreement with you. That's basically what's happening right now. Now, this week, Raymond James Stadium filed an objection in this case based on the August 31st proposal that we just talked about, where they said, hey, let's restart the agreement, but the cure amount was $0. Well, now Tampa Bay Vipers and this Tampa Sports Authority filed a limited objection to the order that was submitted, claiming that the cure amount of $0 was incorrect. This doesn't mean that they're not having anything to do with each other, but that they want to negotiate a different number. Now, in the documentation, the TSA, not the TSA that you know, the Tampa Sports Authority, does not object to the assigning of the lease, meaning restarting the contract. They do contend that the cure amount, however, should be $90,000, broken down as $30,000 per game not played. That's a little tough. COVID shut things down. You still want to get paid. We would all like to get paid, but COVID is whatever happened is, come on. But hey, I'm not part of that negotiation because they basically missed 3 scheduled games. In the filing, the entire agreement is included outlining what was signed by both parties. The TSA also released the following statement in the document, quote, TSA expressly reserves the right to submit and or amend the limited objection at any time to add additional sums that may accrue and or become due under the venue use agreement after the date hereof. Furthermore, nothing contained herein shall be construed as a waiver of any rights or remedies of TSA provided for in the revenue use agreement, its right to enforce any provisions of the revenue use agreement, or its rights provided for in its proof of claim filed against the debtor bankruptcy estate. Therefore, creditor Tampa Sports Authority requests this honorable court to enter in an order correcting the amount set forth in the cure notice to reflect the accurate pre-petition cure amount of $90,000. That TSA will be paid a cure amount of $90,000 in connection with the assumption of the venue use agreement. That TSA be awarded any further additional relief this court deems just and proper. What does this mean? It means that TSA, Tampa Sports Authority, is saying if you pay us $90,000 as part of our agreement to get restarted, we want to get paid $90,000. So if the XFL pays them $90,000, then they're going to restart the agreement, which is great. If you weren't planning to play in Tampa, then you could care less about this agreement and you would just let it go away and that would be it, and not try to make an agreement and move on to the next potential venue. So it looks like from the court documents that Tampa will in fact have a team in 2021 or 2022, at least for the foreseeable future. It seems that to me, seeing all this stuff, and we saw it in Houston and some other places, is that they're just trying to restart everything and potentially just go with what they have right now. If they play in a bubble, then this kind of stuff doesn't matter because you could move to Orlando a year later. So either they're going to do the bubble thing and they'll still be the Tampa Bay Vipers and then they wait next year. But still, if you're paying $90,000, you're going to give it at least another run. And in all honesty, they should give everything another run because everything was cut short. And throwing this out there, if you throw in a guy coaching your team in Tampa and Steve Spurrier, then your ticket sales might not be so low after all. But something to stay tuned and keep an eye on as we continue to comb through all of these legal documents and find out some kind of nugget information for you guys. But it seems to us at XFL News Hub that the Tampa Bay Vipers are not going to be the Orlando Vipers, that the Vipers will be staying in Tampa for the foreseeable future.
Blandino, the head of officiating for the XFL. How's it going, Dean?
It's going well. How are you guys doing?
Oh man, we're great. We're happy that there's some XFL football possibly in the foreseeable future, and we're getting pretty geared up about everything, man. So we're super excited to have you on, and yeah, man, it's great to have you on the show. Thank you for stopping by.
It's obviously it's been interesting times, and it's good to kind of catch up, and hopefully, like you said, hopefully we can get some XFL football here in the near future.
That's right. Well, Dean, we have a couple of questions for you, my man, and number one, I'll take the baton first, and then I'll pass it over to Joe, since this is his first.
That's fair.
His first on-air interview. But I want to ask you this: what rule did you want to see implemented in the XFL that wasn't? Was there any rules that were possibly nixed before the launch of the XFL, or is there something that they excluded from the initial launch of the league?
Yeah, there were a few. What was great about the process is the league, there were a lot of people involved, and they talked to a lot of people around football and fans, and when they were designing the rules, and there were a couple that we were thinking about initially and ultimately decided not to go with. Two that I thought, would have been interesting to see how they played out would have been where not allowing offensive line to be in a 3-point stance. So it would have been all 2-point stance, more of a pass blocking posture. Ultimately, we decided against it. Would have been different, in terms of running the ball and short yardage. But it just would have been interesting to see from a player's safety perspective, would that have potentially eliminated some of those, head-to-head collisions and contact that happens in that close line play. The other one in the same area was a a 1 yard neutral zone where the defense would have to be at least a yard away from the football. And again, designed to potentially reduce some of those high impact head to head collisions. Neither rule was implemented, but it would have been interesting to see what would have came out of those.
Definitely, because, the XFL branded itself based off of family-oriented football, and one of the main concerns that they brought to the table whenever they relaunched this league was decreasing potential safety hazards, such as the kickoffs that the NFL uses quite often, or they use it now. And for me, what I love to see was the fact that they weren't as engaged once the ball was kicked off. They had some space, and it seemed like it was a line of scrimmage play. So for them not to use this rule, the 1 yard neutral zone, that's pretty interesting, especially since the XFL did pride itself on safety as a whole. So yeah, that would have been a great rule to see. Also, why do you think that the NFL hasn't implemented a sky judge like the one that the XFL used with the cool Xbox controller?
Yeah, I think the NFL is seriously considering that, and they actually wanted to do an experiment in the preseason this year. Unfortunately, we're not getting a preseason because of COVID. So I think you're going to see some form of a sky judge in the NFL in the near future, and they're going to study it and figure out what the sky judge can look at. But we really felt that it made a lot of sense having the person upstairs with the access to the video that could help the officials get plays right, because the game is so fast and it happens very quickly, and it's tough to officiate in some situations. So if you can have the video to help you get some of those game-changing calls right, we felt that was a good thing, and I think the NFL will move in that direction.
Okay, good to hear, especially since the NFL is talking about, getting a little bit safer out here with all these dangerous head-on collisions. Joe, what you got for Mr. Blandino?
Yeah, Dean, I know you worked with replay, back in the day. And so my question for you is, is there any, call, any replay decision that stands out in your mind that, might have been controversial, anything that, any what I'm talking about, anything
Sure.
that stands out in your mind. Yeah.
Well, there's definitely, obviously I'll always be connected with the Des Bryant play against the Packers. And that was, I know that was, you were it was on the tip of your tongue. You wanted to bring it up, but I'll bring it up for you. Certainly controversial. At the time, though, it really wasn't a difficult call to make based on the rule at the time. And we knew it was going to be controversial. We knew, obviously, it's a big play in that game, a playoff game. And ultimately, the rule was tweaked to make a play like that a catch. But at the time, it was just, other than being controversial, it wasn't that difficult a call to make. There were others that were probably tougher calls to make. And replay, sometimes there's judgment, especially when you're dealing with catch, no catch. Even goes back to like the Calvin Johnson play against the Bears. I thought that one was probably even tougher. That one, to me, was probably more of a catch under the old rule than the Dez play. But that Dez play definitely is one that people, especially Cowboys fans, they don't let me forget that one.
Yeah, I'm still having nightmares, Dean. So I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, me, like you said, me and Joe are big time Cowboys fans. And when I watched that game, I can speak for myself. I was like, what? He made a football move and he fumbled the ball towards the goal line. What's up with that? Why was there so much uncertainty regarding this rule? But man, that is always going to burn us for the rest of our lives, Dean.
I know, but we've come a long way where we can all talk about it cordially and very civil, discussion.
For sure. Definitely. That's all it's about, man. It's all about being cordial and ensuring that you are professional. Let me ask you this as well, Dean. What is the status of the referees that worked in the XFL? Are some of them or any of them working in college again, or potentially the NFL? Have you heard any rumors about that?
Yeah, so all of the officials that we used in the XFL last year, they were all college officials. and they all remain college officials. Now, obviously, some conferences aren't playing in the fall, so some of those officials aren't working right now, but they were all on college conference staffs, and some are working, some aren't. Some did. There were roughly 5 to 6 of our XFL officials last year did make it to the NFL. So you'll see a couple of the XFL officials working in the NFL this fall. And, the XFL was great. It was an opportunity for those officials, just like it was for the players, to get on tape and potentially get that opportunity to get to the NFL. And some of the officials did make it this season.
And that's something that's great, too, because like you said, it not only offered an opportunity for the players, it offered the opportunity for officials to go back out there and do what they love, which is officiate. You got coaches, you got general managers who were able to use their skill that they developed over a long amount of time and implement that and use that and utilize it in the XFL. So that's always a great thing. Now, this is my final question. I know Joe has something, but how much of an adjustment, because I was just wondering, because I watched these college football games over the weekend, but how much of an adjustment will it be for these referees to use the electronic whistles? I don't know, how does that work? That's very interesting to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a different deal. And so the electronic whistle, obviously this is a health and safety thing, because they don't want officials, your normal whistle, like you're bringing it to your mouth, you're blowing the whistle, particles are going into the air. So they wanted to go away from that. The electronic whistle, so the concept is it's basically, it's a button that you press, and it sounds a very similar to what a traditional whistle would sound like. I think some of the concerns is, if you're carrying it in your hand and you accidentally press the button, now a whistle blows in the middle of the play. So I think most officials will keep it on their belt, and then when the play is over, they'll reach for it and press the button, and the whistle will sound. It's definitely going to be an adjustment. We've seen it. We've had some college games already, and there's definitely been some growing pains. And we'll certainly, starting with Thursday night with the Chiefs and the Texans, we're going to see the NFL officials using it. And again, this is a different environment, and everybody has to adjust, because obviously the health and safety is the most important point.
Most definitely with unprecedented times.
So the concept is, it's basically, it's a button that you press, and it sounds a very similar to what a traditional whistle would sound.
We got double the sound.
Like. I think some of the concerns.
Joe, did you hit something, man?
No.
It's playing on double the sound.
I
don't know what's going on with that dude.
The health and safety.
It must feel weird to hear you say that whole thing over again. Well, Dean, Joe, you got anything left for Dean?
You answered my question about the Des thing. I just wanted to hear from your words, what you thought about that. And you're right, it wasn't the catch at the time. But I do know that, as times change and the rule change, now it would have been a catch. But, it's all in the past. We move on. We've got to move on.
We've got to move on. And, but I appreciate the Cowboy fans are passionate. That's for sure. I appreciate that. No doubt.
We're going to the Super Bowl this year. It's already decided.
All right. Let's see what happens.
Hey, Dean, I do want to ask you, what likelihood do you feel like we'll get the XFL back potentially in 2021, or could it potentially be a later date? I just want to ask you that because, I know you have some relationships with some people. If you have some information you can share, that's cool. If not, that's completely fine as well.
Yeah, I don't know much at this point. I'm hoping that we can get XFL football in the spring in 2021. I'd love to be involved. But I think at this point, it's just, I think they're still working through the purchase and getting everything done. And I think then, you can't ask for a better group of people if you're talking about, Dwayne Johnson and Dani Garcia and this group. I'm excited about the potential. And, I don't know from a timing perspective if spring 2021 is too soon. We'll see. But I know one thing, we're going to see the XFL again, and I'm excited for that, and I would love to be a part of it.
Hey, that makes us all happy over here in the XFL community. Well, Dean, I just want to thank you personally for coming on the show, man. It's a true honor to speak with you. Me and Joe are big fans of your work.
Yeah.
Without the Dez Bryant catch thing. No, I'm kidding. But we're true fans of your work, and we're hoping that we see you whenever the XFL does return.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, and I'd love to come back and join the show somewhere down the line.
For sure, for sure. Hopefully, less technical difficulties the next time.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
I appreciate it, Dean. We have a good one, man, and stay safe out there.
All right, you too. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dean.
Thanks, Dean.
What's up, XFL Army? If you're a fan of the XFL News Hub and you have a telephone, which I know all of you do because you're sitting there playing on your phones all the time, then why not download the XFL News Hub app? That's right, it's on iTunes. It's on Android. We have an Android version and an iPhone version of the XFL News Hub app. So what do you get? You get the latest news from XFL News Hub, the premier source of XFL news in the universe. Plus, you get push notifications when we have breaking news. You will be the first to know. You can leave a comment on some of the news right from your phone. Plus, you get this podcast on your phone as well. Remember, you can leave us reviews on the Google Play Store or iTunes. It links to other social media, our other social media accounts, and so much more. Be in the know. I know you're on your phones. People are on their phones all the time. They never get off their phones. So why not just download the XFL News Hub app on your Android or iPhone today? All you need to do is go to the Google Play Store or iTunes and just type in XFL News Hub. That's XFL News Hub. Download our app on your phone today. All right, let's get to our social media stuff. First, we're hitting the Facebooks, where we talked about last week on the Facebooks that we hit 2,000 subscribers for our YouTube channel. We're pretty excited about that, considering, we're kind of this in-between world and we're still posting stuff out there. So we appreciate that. Vargas J. Michael says, we want journalists who love football, also supports the XFL to strive for success and reports updates to the fans without promoting the NFL 24/7. Well, that's us. That's what we do. Thanks for the message there. On Marquette King saying he will not return the XFL and focus on the NFL. Todd says only time will tell. Right now is NFL time, so this could change come XFL time. I agree with that. Caleb says he's definitely good enough. I agree with that. Craig Bryant said he should have stayed, but again, he might just be trying to get in the NFL, but still going to play in the XFL if he doesn't get a shot. And he was a great punter. Leon says, I'll take his place. Oh, and Leon Brooks is going to take his place. Okay. On our Matt Nagashima's article about the 2020 XFL Fan Awards, Best Fans in the XFL, which is a lot of fun. Mason Jones and Dan Sidwell goes, caw. You want to check that out. That's a great article that goes over some of the best moments and best fans in the XFL. That's a lot of fun. Check out that article on XFL News Hub. On to the YouTube, the Garage Stage something, talking about who would be the next commissioner. Wasn't this already posted and talked about before? So little news is coming from reporting old posts. No, not necessarily. I'll say this. I really supported this league, but if they don't start in the spring 2021, I'm done with them. There is no reason for them not to go ahead. And that's one thing I worry about too, is if they don't play and wait another year. You have to deal with COVID. You have to deal with television contracts. There's so many things that are going on right now, but we'll see. We're hoping to hear something concrete in October, so stay tuned for that. About the new XFL regime, Steven says, I'm just saying there's never been more perfect window if they don't screw it up. Polarized fans boycotting NFL, and on top of college talent being totally screwed by the pandemic. However, now these guys are starting to go back. XFL has proven to be a path to the league. Skip the classes, skip the politics out of schools. Talking about that. Yuriko Killa about relocation says Dallas should move to Fort Worth, OKC, Austin, or San Antonio. Okay. He says the New York team either should move to the Red Bull Stadium or move either to Connecticut or Long Island. Interesting. I think Red Bull Stadium is probably the way to go. Rep Joe Walsh about the relocation. Seattle should relocate to Spokane, Tacoma, or Portland. Dallas and Houston should relocate to San Antonio and Austin. LA should relocate to San Diego. Oakland, San Jose, Sacramento, or Anaheim. Seattle's going nowhere. Their stuff was good. What are you talking about, Rep Joe Walsh? Tampa should relocate. Oh, I already said all this stuff. Tampa should relocate to Orlando, Fort Lauderdale, Mobile, or New York should relocate to Delaware, Connecticut, or Rhode Island. No, who are you talking? Get out of here. Till Brooks says, I'm actually okay with them not moving to Orlando. This is on our story about Tampa Bay Vipers may not be moving to Orlando. I don't think they are. I'm actually okay with them not moving to Orlando. I felt like with more time, things will be okay in Tampa. I'd be more bummed that the Dallas Renegades don't move to San Antonio and the Alamo don't. Dallas isn't moving anywhere. San Antonio can and will support the XFL. True American says that. Okay. I think I already know so long how found out they aren't moving. You guys got this late. I know, right? Well, I don't know what you're talking about there. Okay. Give you a little like. Juan Carlos Arzago says, do you think XFL and AAF will merge? I also want to know more about the Dallas Renegades. They are not going to merge. Maybe they buy their assets one day. Dallas is not moving anywhere. Davin says, yes, talking about Tampa Bay Vipers. I want Tampa to move close to me. About Jeffrey Pollock and some others who could be commissioner. He said, Pollock, this is Mr. XO Warrior, says Pollock, he advised the Spanos into the ground. No way. I think he's talking about the Chargers. Hip Hop Herbietown says, you are the new XFL Chalk Talk. That channel is dead. Yeah, I don't know what happened with those guys. Rolled Tide 93. I really enjoyed the Iron and hated the AAF folded. I love going to the games even with the hour-and-a-half drive. Hope Beham gets a team if they do expand. That's part of our relocation videos. Gone Ballistic. We did the helmet rankings a while back. Number 1, he's got Guardians. 2, Battlehawks. 3, Seattle Dragons. 4, Renegades. 5, Houston Roughnecks. 6, LA Wildcats. Vipers at 7. And number 8, the DC Defenders. Not a bad list. About the relocation, XL Gift says, just give me a Boston, Chicago, or Miami team and I'll be fine. Last season, I liked the Roughnecks, but that was it. Okay. Faith and Logic says, don't move Tampa, just add Orlando. Someday, I don't know. Florida team, I don't know about Florida. I mean, you got Jacksonville, you got 3 NFL teams in Florida. I would much rather see teams in other states than 2 in Florida. JB says there definitely needs to be a team in Alabama at some point. Yeah, we've talked to those people involved with that. Stephen Miller said, I think they'll pull it off. This was to the director of operations, says 6 weeks to prep the players for 2021. I think they can pull it off, too. The Gangster Stage 1, talking about our Zoom call stuff. If not 2021, then they lost me. And then Fan Caesar says bandwagon fan spotted. It's going to be tough, though. It will be tough if they don't come through with a 2021 season. It'd be hard for fans to wait a whole year to really get into it. I think you really lose some momentum. You got to do whatever you can to get in your season. And I think the bubble is the best option. Bubble is what you're going to focus on. I would focus on a full season, but then bubble as the backup. Zane says they should start to make a video game. They need to finish the season first, my friend Zane. Thomas says their biggest challenge is not going woke once the first knee bends during the anthem and or criminal's name goes on the uniform. Consider the season over. Viewership will equal that of the WNBA. Okay, I get another person that bringing up the thing that they don't want involved in sports, but bring it up all the time. Okay. On to we got hit Facebook, YouTube, now on to the Twitter. Mickey Wynn says it will likely be 2022 if for nothing else they cannot play in a bubble since they cannot get media deals with ad sharing. The only way they make money is on the stadium sponsorships, gate, merch, and maybe something in the sale of food and drink. They need to legally get 20,000 in a building first. I mean, that is the economic problem, but you did demonstrate that you could bring in ratings, and you have shows like AEW Dynamite that got, they don't even hit 1 million on a Wednesday night that get 40, get $45 million contracts. So they could get you your million ratings. Is that worth, that could potentially, they just need some money. And you could still sell the tickets, the season ticket packages, and just punt it for another year so you have that cash too. I don't know. There's some smart people up there. They'll figure it out. Boogie Cavanes says, don't forget to add him to the running backs list. Okay. XFL, Jim, CFB, NFL, X League Guru. Okay. All this does is give me hope for 2021. I am ready to be crushed, but right now I can't be brought down. So he's excited there. Also, Termana is probably the new official drink of the XFL. He says that too. Let's see what else. Richard Humphrey, Richard O for real. This is fantastic news talking about Garcia and the whole The Rock and the Zoom call. Even if the leagues start late, they still have time for the spring. I really hope Dani, Garcia, and The Rock have the league up and running by the end of the month. I don't know about this month, but maybe by the end of October could be something to wait for there. John Turner says, I'm no director of operations, but I'd say they'd need closer to 16 weeks to get things going. I guess that's referring to the football players getting ready, 16 weeks. I think the league would need 16 weeks to get ramped up. I don't know about the players, but maybe. Who knows? Let's see what else we got there. Definitely check out Mike Mitchell's article about the top 100 players not signed by NFL teams. That's a big list out there. He did a great job on that one. Check that one out there. A lot of people are talking about that. On to some emailers. We got a bunch of emails this week. Our first email, Clifford checking in, says on future XFL expansion teams, Omaha, Nebraska, and Oklahoma City would be good areas to look at. Okay. Paul giving us a long email. He says, hey, Mark, I'm a big fan of your podcast. I want to thank you for your hard work. I've heard so many fans and media members mention how the Tampa Bay Vipers had poor attendance and they should move to Orlando. As a diehard Vipers fan and Tampa resident, I feel obligated to defend Tampa and get some facts straight. All right, here we go. Myth number 1, Vipers attendance was bad. That's the myth. The fact, the Tampa Bay Vipers had 18,117 fans, which was the third best attendance for their Week 3 home opener behind St. Louis and Seattle. Comparing home openers is the closest apples to apples way to gauge attendance, since once the season starts, attendance is more in a function of how the team is doing. Keep in mind, before the Vipers' first home game, they were 0-2 and hadn't even scored an offensive touchdown. Their second home game attendance dipped for the following reasons. They were 0-3 when the game started. Their 2 local stars weren't playing. Aaron Murray, who played high school in Tampa, was hurt, and Quentin Flowers quit the team. True. It was spring break for University of South Florida. USF plays their home games at Raymond James Stadium. About a third of the fans of the home opener were students. However, it was not spring break for K through 12, and the game was played on a Sunday night. Thus, very few kids and parents attended the game on a school night. All right. The Vipers were another one of Vipers were a boring team. They were run first, ground and pound Mark Trestman office. Put P.J. Walker and Cam Phillips on that team, and it's a different story. True, I could see that. Myth number 2. The Apollo's attendance was great because of the Orlando market. Apollos were hands down the best team in the AAF. They had Steve Spurrier and had the most exciting offense in the AAF. The Apollo team resulted in good attendance, not necessarily the city of Orlando. Another example of apples to oranges. Myth 3, Orlando will do better with an XFL city since they don't have an NFL team. I feel this is a very overrated factor. 1, most Florida residents didn't grow up in Florida. This is true. As a result, all Florida professional teams except for the Miami Dolphins are expansion teams. Generally speaking, transplants are loyal to their hometown and or childhood teams. I grew up in Detroit and remain a Lions fan, not a Bucs fan. This is very, very, very common. Since the XFL is new, it doesn't matter where somebody is from. So in conclusion, there aren't any homegrown Tampa folks who are Bucs fans that are too torn out from the Buccaneers playing that they aren't interested in spring football. That's a good point. College football is bigger in Florida than in the NFL anyways. Since neither play in the spring, Tampa having the Bucs isn't this huge problem. Okay. I'll give you that one too. Myth 4, Tampa and Orlando are similar sized cities. Tampa is the 12th largest metro area in the country, 1.8 million. Orlando is 18th with 1.49 million. That's 20% more. Goes on about the economic stuff, blah, 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 blah. 2, since TV ratings are arguably more important than attendance, having a larger media market is crucial. That's the primary reason the Guardians play in New York and the Wildcats play in LA. I agree with that. Myth 5. The Orlando stadiums are smaller and will look better on TV. That is partially true. Raymond James is 65,000. The lower deck holds 30,000. The 2 stadiums candidates for the XFL team in Orlando would be Camping World Stadium, formerly known as the Citrus Bowl, which has a capacity of 60,000, of which 25,000 in the seats on the lower level. So thus, the TV optics wouldn't matter, concluding there isn't a perfect no-brainer stadium in our Tampa or Orlando. That's true. Myth 6, final one. They'd get so much more revenue from this potential increase in fan attendance. XFL tickets average around $25, and they only have 5 home games. So my crack calculation for every 1,000 more fans per game, that equates to 1,000 times 25 times 5 is $125,000 more in revenue for the season. It may seem like a lot, but since the XFL is on pace for $46 million in revenue, so even in the best case scenario, if moving to Orlando results in attendance shooting up 25%, which is a huge assumption, it would only result in a 1% total increase in XFL total revenue. So in conclusion, not sure it would be a lot of work for such a tiny revenue increase. Thanks for reading the podcast. Sorry, it's a bit long, but I wanted to thoroughly get my reasoning in. That is Paul. Paul needs to work for the XFL. Those are some great points, Paul. Great points in there. And now you have me convinced that the Orlando would keep him in Tampa. And we've seen through some of the legal documents that I think they're going to keep the team in Tampa anyways. And maybe they did those calculations, and now they know. So Dani and The Rock, whoever's listening, now you know why you need to just keep it in Tampa. It's just great points. And I am now, due to that email, a keep him in Tampa guy. I just wanted Orlando to be a little closer to where I potentially might be moving to at some point. If I'd moved down to Florida, it would be easier for me to get to. But other than that, he makes good points. Good points. Thank you. Seth checking in. Maybe with The Rock and XFL, Mike Florio would be kind in their coverage of the XFL. Maybe. Based on your speculation, what TV networks will get the XFL? I see Fox, ESPN, and NBC. A triple threat deal. I don't know about that. I'd like Doug Whaley as commissioner. That's who I'm thinking. SJW means Social Justice Warriors. Google it if you don't know what it means. Okay, thank you. Also said, are you planning on doing a one-time pay gimmick for your app so people can give you X amount and then they get the ads removed? Could bring in more money. How about a dark mode for the app? Interesting. We're definitely looking at, well, first we're working on the fantasy football aspect of it. That's the most important thing. Fantasy football for XFL. That's what we're focused on now. Once that's fixed, I think we definitely want to upgrade the XFL apps. There's no question about that. But we need that data first, kind of thing. That comes first, then the other thing. But we need a season. That's the only thing that would be a 2022 season that would help me and help us is to get some of these things done. We'll see. Jack says, Patreon. Hey, do you guys have a Patreon page? No, this is free. The thing with Patreon, and I thought about it, is that means we'd have to create extra content. And I'm like, I'll just give it to you. And then just hang out with us. When people want to pay for more stuff, maybe. I don't know. Message me, podcast at XFL News Hub if you're interested in Patreon. But you got to give me ideas of what that Patreon, extra Patreon stuff could offer you. That wouldn't take me 20 hours to put together. That would be good. Finally, our Tier 1 emailer, Nicholas, checking in. I like the last podcast about who could be the next commissioner of the XFL. To add on here, some more names I feel that XFL could give a look at. My favorite candidates are in order. He's got Jim Nagy. He might be a hard candidate to get for the XFL, but if they could pull it off, be fantastic. Hire current director of Reese's Senior Bowl, not to mention his resume as a scout. Mike Poliski. He is the president of the AFL Chicago Rush. He's also helped Northwestern get an Under Armour deal. He's the current deputy director of athletics for Northwestern. Before that, he was the president of the American Hockey League, Chicago Wolves. He has been in multiple sports leagues, so has experience in building them from the ground up. Nick Floyd, former AD at UL Monroe, East Carolina, associate AD at Southern Miss. He's currently available and could make sense because of his experience. Ed Stewart, assistant Big 12 commissioner and former AD at Missouri, would be a great candidate. Scott Paddock, similar to Jeffrey Pollock, he had worked in racing. He is the current president of Chicago Speedway and might use this as an opportunity to grow his career. Diana Sabu, the XFL is about diversity. Diana Sabu, I'm probably saying it wrong, has spent many years as a senior associate of athletics at Ohio State, and she could fit in what the XFL is trying to do, and the XFL could help her grow as well. Louis Riddick, former scout turned ESPN personality, former head of personnel for Washington and the Eagle Middleton Overton, former athletic director of Florida A&M, and current athletic director of Kennesaw State. Before that, he was associate director for Alabama. Harold Richardson, former head of East-West Shrine Game. John Dorsey, you've heard that name before. I don't know if XFL should make Dorsey the commissioner, but he does have an eye for talent that can be used in some capacity. Phil Savage, former head of Senior Bowl and former Arizona Hotshots GM. I think Phil Savage worked for the Baltimore Ravens too. Joe Alveria, former athletic director at LSU and Duke, and Eric Hyman, former athletic director of Texas A&M, South Carolina, would be a long shot, but he just recently retired. Nicholas, checking in with a bunch of names that could potentially be the next XFL commissioner. We will find out, hopefully in October. All right, that's it for this week's show. Again, we want to thank Dean Blandino, talking with our own Jay Noakes about everything XFL rules related. That was a great conversation that they all had there. We appreciate that. We appreciate Jay for putting that all together. We want to thank you guys for hanging out with us, all of our social media stuff, all the emails we get in. So if you want to be part of the show, email podcast@xflnewshub.com or call 888-430-7692 extension 3. Follow us on all the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you know the whole deal. YouTube, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is growing. Plus, you can download our app, and we're also working on fantasy football. I've talked about that before, so stay tuned for that. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll read it on the show. That really helps us out. And you can listen to this podcast anywhere you want. Spotify, Google, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, the whole deal. XFLNewsHub.com/XFL-podcast for all the show notes, and join us on our Discord as well. That's it for this week, my friends. We're getting into towards the end of September. I think it'll be slow the next couple weeks. I have a feeling we'll get something hopefully going and hear some official word coming from the XFL sometime in October. So that's it for me, folks. Thanks for listening. Make sure you wear your mask. Stay safe out there. God bless. Mahalo to all my friends in Hawaii, and I will see you all later.